Russia thought that it was being clever. Having been forced to deal with the leader of a pro-Ukrainian resistance group on its own turf, Russia placed a bounty on that leader's head. $500,000 would go to whoever could prove that the leader of the Russian volunteer corps, Denis Capustin, was dead. Russia didn't care where, it didn't care how. All Russia wanted was Kapustin's head, and it got it, or so Russia thought. In a brilliant operation, Ukrainian spies faked the death of the Russian volunteer corps leader. And to add insult to injury, the $500,000 that the Kremlin offered for Kapustin is now in Ukraine's war chest, ready to fund the Ukrainian effort to defend itself against Vladimir Putin's supposed special military operation. Russia couldn't have suspected that a thing was wrong when reports started circulating that a drone strike had killed the leader of the Russian Volunteer Corps, or RVC. Denis Capustin, who had been a thorn in the Kremlin's side since Putin launched his Ukraine invasion, was dead. That's the claim that many news outlets made toward the end of December 2025, including the Moscow Times. In its report on Kapustin's death, the outlet said that the RVC itself has announced the killing of its leader, who it said had died on the front lines while fighting for Ukraine. There were even details that made the whole thing even more convincing. The RVC said that Kapustin had been taking part in a combat mission in Zaporizhia, which is a region that Russia spent much of 2025 assaulting. It would make sense to have a man like Kapustin in that region, as Ukraine would need every willing soldier it could find to fight against the Russian forces making slow progress in an oblast that Putin says is vital for Russia to take. The RVC even put out a statement in which it claimed, "We will definitely have our revenge, Denis. Your legacy lives on." To Russia, everything seemed perfect. A man whom the country placed on its federal registry of terrorists and extremists back in March 2023 had been taken out by the very kinds of drones that Ukraine has used to kill tens of thousands of invading Russian forces. But you know what they say about things that seem too good to be true. They usually are. However, the RVC in Ukraine had been incredibly smart about showing just how Kapustin supposedly died. Knowing that a statement of the RVC leader's death and a pledge for revenge wouldn't be enough to net the bounty on Kapustin's head, Ukraine's intelligence officers needed to provide proof. The first-person view, or FPV drone supposedly used to kill the RVC leader just so happened to serve as the ideal platform for gathering that proof. FPV drones record footage of the battlefield as they see it in real time. A strike conducted by one of these drones would thus deliver the kind of video that the Kremlin needed to see as proof that Kapustin was dead. So that's just what Ukraine made. Military reported on the video that was sent to Russian authorities on January 2nd. It said that Ukraine created the video both to protect the commander's life and to expose an enemy agent network operating inside Ukraine. The bounty then was just a fringe benefit, and the video is very convincing. Published on Facebook by the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, or HUR, the brief footage shows what would seem for all the world like the sort of FPV strike that Ukraine and Russia have both carried out many times before. Ukraine used 2 strike drones to create the footage. The first of those drones carried out the supposed attack. In the footage, we see it fly above a dirt road leading to a minibus carrying Kapustin. It appears that the RVC leader was actually inside that minibus, which was all part of the act. Presumably, Ukraine's FPV drone had no warhead, meaning clever editing tricks simulated the immediate shutdown of the drone's real-time video feed at the precise point when the drone struck. Believing that even the direct footage of Kapustin's terrified face as the drone approached wouldn't be enough, HUR added video shot by a second drone in the aftermath of the supposed attack. This drone approached the now burning minibus, completing the illusion. When the footage was spliced together, Russia would have seen the RVC's commander climb into the minibus and get hit by a drone, followed by the footage of the same minibus covered in flames. It was realistic, convincing, and 100% fake. HUR revealed its subterfuge on January 1st, almost immediately after Ukraine cashed the $500,000 check it received for supposedly killing one of Russia's most wanted men. Taking to Telegram, HUR said, "As a result of the complex special operation of the HUR of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, which lasted more than a month, the life of the commander of the RVC, Denis Capustin, whom the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin considers a personal enemy, was saved, and a circle of people, the ones who ordered the crime in the Russian special services and the executors, was also established. The salt in the Russian wound was added by Kirill Budanov, who is the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, though he was the chief of HUR at the time the operation was carried out. Our side also received the appropriate amount of funds allocated by the Russian special services for the implementation of this crime. As of now, the commander of the RVC is on the territory of Ukraine and is preparing to continue fulfilling the assigned tasks, Budanov said in HUR's Telegram post. This is a triple victory for Ukraine. Kapustin's life was saved, HUR says. This means that HUR knew that Russia had its sights on Kapustin and was preparing to take him out. Ukraine getting there first meant the attack likely due against Kapustin never happened. With the supposed proof of death that Russia's forces needed, HUR was also able to root out those trying to kill the RVC leader. Plus, as we've established, HUR even managed to secure the bounty on Kapustin's head before taking out those who wanted to kill the commander. That's a very productive operation for Ukraine. But how did HUR manage to pull all of this off? HUR is typically close-lipped about the operation, likely because it knows that the less Russia understands about what Ukraine did, the more likely it is that HUR will be able to pull off a similar operation in the future. However, Euromaidan Press's report on the fake death reveals that the operation lasted for about a month, and it involved HUR identifying the Russian intelligence officers who had ordered the hit on Kapustin, as well as the operatives assigned to carry out the hit. Speculation abounds as to what happened next. If operatives were assigned to the assassination attempt, that presumably means that the intelligence officers awaiting news of Kapustin's death were expecting it from specific people. Does that mean that Ukraine captured the would-be killers, extracting the information they needed, and then did away with them before filming the video that saved Kapustin and netted Ukraine $500,000? We can't know for sure, though it seems like the most logical course of action, given that Ukraine would have needed to establish the appropriate channels through which to get its hands on the money. But again, that's speculative. What isn't speculation is that it is certainly not a case of the RVC's commander actually being killed, and Ukraine trying to cover up what would otherwise amount to a major loss. We know that because it's not just HUR reporting that Kapustin is alive and well, and that Russia has been hoodwinked. The RVC leader himself has confirmed that reports about his death are greatly exaggerated, to paraphrase Mark Twain. On January 4th, the New Voice of Ukraine published a report on a video statement that Kapustin published on Telegram, which the RVC leader used to confirm that he was still alive. After thanking those who took part in the operation, Kapustin said that he didn't expect there to be such a large reaction to his supposed death. He lauded the military operation as an absolute success, adding that the disinformation fed to Russia by HUR was not a farce, but rather a very deliberate part of a surprisingly complex operation. Kapustin then confirmed that he was still fighting among his fellow volunteer soldiers. Russia had its hopes raised that a very dangerous man was out of the equation, only to have those hopes dashed as it learned that the man it thought was dead was still fighting, even as the Kremlin shelled out hundreds of thousands of dollars. Egg, meet Putin's face. Amazingly, this isn't the first time that Russia has fallen for this kind of clever Ukrainian deception. As Euromaidan Press reports, Ukraine pulled off something very similar when the Security Service of Ukraine, or SBU, faked the murder of a Russian journalist and prominent Putin critic, Arkady Babchenko. In May 2018, Ukrainian police reported that Babchenko, who was living in Kyiv, had been shot 3 times in the back. He had been found bleeding on the floor, the police claimed, and was pronounced dead in an ambulance. Again, Putin rejoiced. Any time that he manages to silence a voice that questions the regime is a good day for Putin. However, a day is literally all the time that Putin had to celebrate this supposed victory. Just 24 hours after the apparent murder took place, Babchenko walked into a press conference, proving to the world that he was still very much alive. As with Kapustin, Ukraine carried out this devious ploy to discover who was attempting to kill the journalist. And, as Babchenko himself pointed out, others may have also been spared Putin's wrath. My life was saved, but what is more important, more serious terrorist attacks were prevented, Babchenko said when revealing that he was still alive. The person who wanted to kill Babchenko, along with the would-be assassin assigned to the job, both ended up in Ukrainian custody. Euromaidan Press reports that Ukraine's new tactics drew criticism back in 2018. Reporters Without Borders called the whole affair a distressing simulation, as it decried what the SBU had done. Other organizations, such as the OSCE, criticized Ukraine for spreading false information. However, all of these responses came during a time before Putin had turned what was previously a campaign of aggression into a full-blown invasion. Fast forward to the beginning of 2026, and Ukraine has followed a blueprint it established almost 8 years ago, and what was once criticized now looks like a brilliant. Frankly, Ukraine won't care about any criticism. It will be laughing as Putin tries to get rid of the wool that's just been pulled over his eyes. Given that HUR apparently dedicated around a month of planning to carry out the faked death of Kapustin, the question has to be asked, why dedicate so many resources to just one man? There are good reasons, though some might argue that they don't have much to do with the character of Kapustin himself. Rather, they have more to do with his leadership of an organization that has been causing Russia problems for years. After all, Kapustin isn't the nicest man in the world. If anything, he could be a poster child for the claims that Putin has made about Ukraine having a problem with neo-Nazis. Though Russia's leader has falsely claimed that Ukraine is run by neo-Nazis, he would be right to claim that Kapustin falls under that umbrella. As Novaya Gazeta said in its December 27, 2025 report on Kapustin's supposed death, the RVC leader has a very checkered past. Once upon a time, he was a football hooligan living in Moscow, the outlet says, as well as being a neo-Nazi activist who has spent a large portion of his youth in Germany. 2 years after arriving in Kyiv in 2017, Kapustin was also banned from entering the Schengen area. This is a massive region of Europe where border checks have been abolished between various countries. Most members of the European Union are members of this area, as are Norway, Switzerland, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. In other words, Kapustin has been banned from traveling in much of Europe since 2019. For his part, Kapustin denies ever being a neo-Nazi, though he does claim that he once held far-right views. "You'll never find me raising my hand in a Hitler salute," Kapustin said in 2023. However, Kapustin's banishment from the Schengen area still raises a lot of questions about who the man that Ukraine just used to fool Russia is as a person. But it's not Kapustin's views that really matter to Putin, it's what the man has made. As the head of the RVC, Kapustin leads a group of Russian fighters who are actively trying to eradicate Putin while ensuring that Ukraine retains its sovereign status. In fact, Kapustin founded the RVC with the stated missions of overthrowing Putin and ensuring that Ukraine's borders are restored to what they were in 1991. Until all occupied territories return to Ukraine, the RVC will carry on fighting. And fighting is something that the group does well enough to justify the $500,000 that Russia placed on Kapustin's head. According to Militani, the RVC is one of the more interesting paramilitary groups operating in support of Ukraine because of how it attracts its members. A significant number of those now fighting within the RVC are former Russian soldiers captured by Ukraine, alongside Russian volunteers and emigrants, who have chosen to take up arms against the very leader who originally sent them to war. Other members are Russian immigrants who live in Ukraine, as well as Russians who lived in other countries but chose to travel to Ukraine with the express purpose of joining the RVC to fight against Putin. So Kapustin is the face and figurehead of a movement that showcases that there are Russians who oppose Putin, and it's a very effective unit. In particular, the RVC has caused major problems for Russia in the border regions between Ukraine and Russia. Back in 2023, the Center for Eastern Studies reported that several Russian volunteers, including those working with the RVC, were working to destabilize Russia's Belgorod region, perhaps with a view to opening up opportunities for attacks by the Ukrainian military. Working alongside another partisan group named the Free Russia Legion, RVC has taken part in sabotage operations in the small town of Shebekino. Earlier, Russian volunteers had blown up a pair of roads located at the junction of Ukraine's borders with Russia and Belarus. In May 2023, the New York Times even reported on claims made by Kapustin that his volunteer forces had even managed to control about 16 square miles of Russian territory in the border regions. So the RVC was active fairly early in the Ukraine war. Under Kapustin's leadership, the group has remained a dangerous force. Given that HUR's faked video showed Kapustin's face, it's safe to assume that he and the RVC are now fighting inside Ukraine. Whether they're on the front lines or operating within the Russian rear isn't clear. However, the Belgorod incursion alone ensures that Putin knows how dangerous the man that Russia is so desperate to kill really is. The Kremlin is also desperate to shut down Kapustin because of his ideology. This is a man who said, "I want to prove that it's possible to fight against a tyrant, that Putin's power is not unlimited, that the security services can beat, control, and torture the unarmed, but as soon as they meet a full-armed resistance, they flee," in 2023. Putin can't allow that sort of talk to go unpunished. But in his desperation to have Kapustin killed, Putin has only proven that Russia's president is as fallible as the RVC's leader claims him to be. All that Russia has managed to achieve with its bounty is provide Ukraine with more funds that it can use for all sorts of purposes. Perhaps that money will go toward equipping RVC members or tempting more people into the group. $500,000 could also buy a lot of FPV drones. These types of drones cost as little as $400 per unit, according to Defense Blog. It would be a cruel kind of irony for Russia if Ukraine uses the money that Russia just paid out to fund the creation of over 1,000 of the very types of drones used to fake the Kapustin death footage. But if nothing else, Kapustin's faked death demonstrates that Russia still hasn't found a way to deal with the partisan problem that is leading to increasing instances of sabotage and spying, often conducted by Russians who are sympathetic to Ukraine's cause. The RVC and Kapustin are parts of a much larger shadow army that Ukraine is deploying to damage Putin's war effort in any way it can. As the Atlantic Council said in February 2025, an extensive network of civil resistance activists, partisans, and military special forces units currently operate throughout Russian-occupied Ukraine, conducting everything from information campaigns to sabotage operations. Kapustin's death was meant to be a blow to the collective morale of such movements. Instead, the bounty offered only proved how dangerous Russia believes these types of groups to be, which will likely lead to growth and more operations being conducted in the future. Russians who may have been considering volunteering for Ukraine have just seen how fallible the Kremlin really is. Kapustin's fake death may end up being a very useful advertisement for groups that are always looking for more people to fight. There is plenty of evidence that groups like the RVC are becoming more effective. In the days leading up to Christmas, these types of organizations conducted a series of sabotage operations that stalled Russian logistics and struck Moscow's air power. Russia's safe zones were burning as the partisans in Ukraine struck major blows. Find out about it all in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of the many ways that Ukrainian intelligence humiliates Russia. And thank you, as always, for watching.